I like to use this time to answer all your questions. So as you light up the chat box, I'll take pauses and I will answer questions as well. So please don't be shy. Already got our first one. And we'll talk a little bit about contagiousness after vaccine, after having COVID, and also want to touch on the new variants because I think that's creating some noise out there. So COVID in general, right now in the state of Wisconsin, our numbers continue to trend downward, almost in every category, to be honest with you. Some of it, we're not sure if it's a true picture. And by that, I mean the testing and the percent positivity. We're a little concerned because of the lack of testing out there. And the lack of testing isn't because of resources. It's more of desire. We have a lot of pushback when we ask somebody to go get tested, especially if they're in quarantine and they just don't want to know, quote unquote. There's obviously financial implications for everybody if they're turned positive, if they miss work, depending on the work that handles that. Parents don't want to get students tested because they could miss basketball. I mean, these are all real life scenarios. So it's really creating an uneven picture of what's going on in the state. So that's a little concerning for us right now. But most of the numbers are trending well. Hospital numbers are bouncing all over. Locally here, we went down today, but yesterday we had a spike. So, it's not gone by any means. We still have a good amount of patients within our city or Northeast Wisconsin that are in the hospital with COVID. And that's a concern for us because we do know just the way this disease has worked that we likely will see a third surge. And why are we more worried about a third surge right now? It is because of the term that you've all been introduced to, a variant, which is basically a mutated version of that wild type strain, the original strain of COVID that we saw. So if we go back to March and we talked about COVID, we talked about how contagious this was, how scary it was. It's like a wildfire that just spreads like crazy. Well, now take that wildfire and make it 50 times more potent in its spread. And that's essentially what you're seeing in these variants. It doesn't make you sicker per se, but more people get it. So statistically, more people wind up in the hospital and more people die just because of the broader population. B117, the UK variant from the United Kingdom, so that's another gift from across the pond, is definitely in the United States, and it's definitely in the state of Wisconsin. So it is thought that this variant in itself will become the dominant COVID-19 strain that we see in Wisconsin by March. Now, and that's given all of our normal mitigation efforts, masking, physical distancing, screening, testing when you need it. If any of us were to lay up on any of that March timeline will move into the next few weeks. So that's very concerning to us. We also have the South African strain, which some feel, and it depends on the studies you're reading and the news you're reading, that it also is as contagious as UK, may cause a little bit different of an illness, maybe a little bit more severe. But it's important to know that the two vaccines, as of today, they're FDA approved, and we'll talk about the J&J one that released their studies yesterday. The two vaccines that we have today, Moderna and Pfizer, seem to be effective at preventing both once you've received the vaccine, at least preventing you from becoming very ill. So that's good news. The bad news is not enough of our population is vaccinated to control this situation, and the situation can very quickly get out of control. So shouldn't let our guard down on that at all. So let's just kind of pivot and talk about everybody's favorite topic, at least everybody's favorite topic to text me about, and we'll talk about vaccines for a little bit. We have, like I mentioned, two vaccines available in the United States, Pfizer and Moderna. Both are very similar in their safety profile, their efficacy profile, and their mechanism. So let's talk about safety. Both are shown to be extremely safe in populations. A very, very small percentage had an allergic reaction, or what we call a severe allergic reaction, anaphylactic reaction. We're talking about 3 amongst the 22 million inoculations given. So the percentage is extremely low, but it's existent. So we have to be careful, but otherwise a very safe vaccine. A lot of people talk to me about the term side effects. So I want to kind of get that out of the way. There are really no side effects to getting the vaccine. Will you have a sore arm? Could you have a small fever? Could you get the chills? Most definitely. Celebrate that. That means your body is reacting and creating an immune response. What happens when both of these vaccines are injected into you is that mRNA, that tiny little piece of genetic material, is surrounded by a fat bubble. We call it a lipid bubble, but a lipid bubble is just a fat bubble. It's a very, very fragile fat bubble, hence why we have to keep this thing so frozen. And that has created interesting challenges for those of us in healthcare, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's injected into you, and that fat bubble releases that mRNA into your cell. That mRNA does not go into the nucleus of your cell, which is the brain. It does not interact with your DNA. It does not change you genetically in any way. What it does is it uses something called a ribosome inside that cell. It's a little protein factory to create a spike protein on the outside of that cell that your body will identify as foreign. That spike protein happens to be genetically identical to the spike protein we see in the COVID-19 viruses that we're seeing right now. So your body says, oh, that's not a good thing, and I'm going to create an immune response. So you get a sore arm because you have antibodies just rushing to your arm. You have a slight fever or chills. That's the antibodies working to recognize the spike protein and destroy it, which means that when you're exposed to COVID-19, your body's revved up and ready to go to get rid of that virus from infecting you. That's kind of how vaccines work. What's so unique about mRNA, and this is where I get to geek out a little bit and say it's cool, is it doesn't stick around. So when we put a normal vaccine into you, the old ones where there was components of the virus, actual virus that we were giving you, those components would eventually be destroyed by your body, but we were actually giving you a component of a virus. We're not in this case. Giving you a small little genetic piece of material to help your body create a component. So we're not giving you COVID-19. And what's even cooler is this mRNA, once it's done creating that protein, it self-destructs. So I use this analogy way too much, but it's like Mission Impossible. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds. That's what mRNA does. Or for our younger generation out there, it's a Snapchat. It does not, it's a snap. It doesn't stick around. So it's gone. And now your body is protected. Why do you need 2 shots? Because we want a really strong immune response. And what they found in the research is that came if you gave it to your body twice and separated by a certain number of days. Pfizer would be 21 days, Moderna would be 28 days. So that separation and that second dose, 2 weeks after that second dose, we found out that these vaccines were efficacious 95 and 94% of the time. If you were to ask me back in September, what would you have been happy with? I would have said 60, 70% would have been amazing. Now we have 95%. That's, amazing. We just need more of it. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I want to touch briefly on vaccines because you'll read today that J&J's data came out. So Janssen's data that came out of this says their vaccine, which is a single shot, doesn't need to be frozen, uses what's called an adenovirus, your common cold, to deliver the spike protein genetic material to your body to help your body make that spike protein, this time through DNA, not mRNA. That adenovirus isn't going to give you adenovirus. It's attenuated. In other words, it's weakened so it can't infect you. But that's the vector. That's how it gets inside your body. That's what they're using instead of that fat droplet. It's a 1-dose regimen, handy. So it can be given in rural environments. It can be given in inner cities. It can be given, in Africa and India, in areas where it's not as easy to maybe do the technicalities of the mRNA vaccine. And it's been shown to be about 60 to 72% efficacious. So once again, if I had the J&J vaccine in September, I'd have been jumping up for joy, but now it's going to be held up against a bar of 95%. Now, in 100% of the time, it prevented a serious illness, hospitalization, and death. So that's awesome news. But now we're going to get a lot of people vaccine shopping for which one they want because of this. We don't know how J&J will be distributed yet, and we don't even know how it's going to go through the FDA process. That'll happen in about 2 weeks. So we really won't be seeing the J&J product probably until we get further down the line of general public vaccination. And it'll likely, like I said, be a great tool in harder to get to environments. So where are we today in the state of Wisconsin with vaccination? Well, we started on December 16th here in Green Bay, first shots given. And I was very clear that we're going to aim small, miss small because of how difficult it is to manage this super cold frozen vaccine. We use Pfizer. Moderna has its own issues too. What we also realized is, if you're going to have to thaw it and use it right away, and it's best drawn up by a pharmacist, in all honesty, or a well-trained nurse with pharmacy supervision, that treating this like the old flu clinics and flu shots, that playbook we had to throw away, which is the playbook that we were working off of in September. So everybody's like, well, why weren't you ready the day it got here? Well, to be honest with you, we got thrown a lot of curveballs, a lot of education in November, and quickly adapted in 2 weeks to basically throw away our flu clinic playbook, vaccination 101, forget all of that, and rewrite the book on December 16th. It was that different. And we've been rewriting the book every day. And December 16th, we realized that we could do this a little bit faster and more efficiently if we had a pharmacy dedication, vaccinator dedication, basically split up the jobs. And we were able to get through most of what you would call your primary 1A phases, which are people that work in healthcare that we needed to stand upright to take care of the third surge. That was a priority, makes sense, because if healthcare collapses, infrastructure collapses. It took us about 2 weeks to kind of get through our own people. Then we opened up to other people that work in our hospitals that are credentialed, that come in and out. Then we opened up to other 1As, dentists, chiropractors, other medical people that are interacting with humans that could create a virus exchange. Then we opened up, then we realized, okay, now the next phases, law enforcement, fire, 65 and older, teachers, you can't do that in a small setting. You need to be able to, if you're going to be really efficiently and get this done by June, we have to do it at scale. And by at scale, we're talking mass vaccination. So that triggered us to make a phone call to Mike Alexander at UWGB, and we had a relationship there because we had been doing their testing for them, and had a relationship with interim system president Tommy Thompson. And in about 24 hours, we were allowed to walk through the Crest Center, and in 5 days, we were able to construct Wisconsin's first, and right now only at this scale, public-facing mass vaccination site. More are coming. We shared our playbook. Last night, we did 1,100 vaccinations in a day. So there's a big difference between getting a supply of 500 and a pharmacy spending a week doing that versus 1,100 in a day. And that's what our strategy is, to do a lot more. So we started doing 65 and older last Tuesday, peaked up this Monday, and our goal as a state, and Prevea plays a role in that, and other health systems are doing an awesome job too. Everybody's scaling up. It's not just us. Just everybody's doing it in their own way, which is great. Our goal is to get through about 50% of that 65 and plus in the month of February. That will allow the state then to move on to other phases. The way the state works is it takes a general advice from the federal government about who to open up the vaccines to, and then a committee here looks at vaccine supply, risk factors, benefit to the community, and creates a phasing situation. So the next phase is technically called 1B. In between 1A and 1B, we did police, fire, correctional officers, and 65 and older. 1B now has a rank order that you can look up online. Starts with educators, you get into grocery, farming, all the way down to a variety of smaller industries, power, etc. on that list. Not all of that will go at once, but none of it will go until a significant portion of that 65 and older is vaccinated. Right now, ballpark March 1st. So why aren't we doing this faster? It's all about vaccine supply. We honestly could ramp up all of our operations by 50% if we had more vaccine. And that's not a state issue. Don't call Madison, call DC. It really is a federal issue on distribution, on manufacturing, on getting rid of the middleman, making this a lot more efficient to give shots in arms. It was not designed to do that, unfortunately, at the get-go. Now, retooling, hopefully we'll see improvement here over the next 3 weeks. Nobody wants to wait 3 weeks, especially me. I'm probably the most impatient man you will ever meet. And many of you know me personally on this call, and you're probably agreeing right now. So you'll need to wait a little bit. We will continue to schedule and open up more slots. And by we, I'm talking all of the vaccinators in the state as vaccine supply becomes available to us. So that's kind of a little bit of an update on where we're at and where the vaccines are at. So I'm going to go to the chat right now and answer some questions. Details on how contagious you are after having COVID. So technically, after the 10 days you've recovered from COVID, you don't need to be retested because there's the thought that you don't have replicating virus in your body anymore, which should make you less contagious. More importantly, you're probably not going to get reinfected with COVID in the first 90 days. We still recommend masking and physical distancing because we don't truly know about the contagiousness at that point, but it's thought that the risk of reinfection, because there's no more replicating virus in you, in that is reduced to 90 days. Why 90 days and not 120 days? Because we had the opportunity to study 90 days. And the immune response from a natural infection is sometimes unpredictable. You could have asymptomatic natural infection. You could have a really severe disease. You have different immune responses. In the vaccine, we have a very predictable immune response, at least through the studies. So after you've recovered from COVID, it is recommended that you get the vaccine. How long do you have to wait for recovery? 10 days. If you're fully recovered after that, in other words, no symptoms in the last 24 hours, we would say on day 11 and 12, if you qualify, you should be vaccinated. Talk about allergies to penicillin and ibuprofen and your thoughts of getting the vaccine. So there are a lot of questions about allergies. So I'm going to handle this in the way the CDC does, in two buckets. Let's talk about general allergies to things that are not injected into you. Penicillin, peanuts, shellfish. If you've had severe allergic reactions to that, in other words, had a hard time breathing, lip swelling, hives, we're going to watch you for 30 minutes, not 15. There's no cross-reactivity with this vaccine because you have a propensity to have an allergic reaction. We're going to watch you longer. Almost all anaphylactic reactions happen within 30 minutes. So we're going to watch you for 30 minutes instead of 15 if you answer yes to that. If you answer yes to having a severe allergic reaction to something that was injected into you, contrast dye for a CT, an antibiotic that was put into an IV, another immunization, we're going to want to take a quick pause, have you see my allergy, understand that allergic response and what it was to, and see how you responded to things since then before clearing you for the vaccine. So two buckets. One, we'll just watch you for 30. The other, we're going to make sure you have an appointment before we bring you in. And we've opened, our allergists will open up their schedules to accommodate all of that. As students and providers are vaccinated, how does that affect their need to step out of practice when exposed to COVID plus patients? So right now, the CDC would say, remember I said 94 and 95% efficacy, not 100%. We don't truly know about transmission because all we studied was the efficacy of preventing disease. The CDC recommendations are that if you have been vaccinated and you are exposed, you would still need to quarantine. So for a school district, anybody making decisions based on vaccines, you shouldn't be making that decision saying that we will have less people on quarantine. That's an inaccurate decision because the quarantine rules will not change right now. What will change is somebody might not be out sick because they didn't get sick because they had the vaccine. That's the only endpoint that will change. What impacts the number of vaccines available to each state? Is Wisconsin behind the other state in the number of allocated doses? Eric, it's based on population. It's a really dumb formula. How's that? Wisconsin's population is less than, say, Florida's, but our ability to get shots may be more efficient in Wisconsin than Florida, and trust me, it is. And the allocations aren't based on disease burden. They're not based on mitigation efforts for the state. They're purely based on population right now. We're hoping the federal government changes their mind on that. So these are all things I'm, kind of feeding you to talk to your federal partners on. The recent recommendations for double masking. All right, so thank you, Dr. Fauci, for this one. CDC still recommends a multi-layered cloth mask, the same recommendation that's been out there for a long time. What Dr. Fauci said and others have said when it comes to double masking, well, yeah, 1 layer is better than 2. 3 layers are better than 4. 4 layers are better than 3. 2 is better than 1. Sorry, I had that backwards. The point is, with these new variants being so contagious, like I said, it's a wildfire on top of a wildfire, that having more layers could create more protection from you spreading it, and even now some protection from you getting it. What's recommended is if you are going to double mask, that the mask that's closest to you be something like this, a multi-layered, professionally made mask. This is a KN95 mask. They're normally white, but I found some black ones. I thought they looked better. So KN95, can't have a regular N95 because that has to be fit tested. But this is a 5-layer protected mask and has a particle limit to it. Harder to get, a little bit more expensive, but you could also get a surgical mask as well. And that's what should be the one that's closest to you. And the one that's on top of it can be a cloth mask if you choose to double mask. Now, is there an official recommendation on that? No. Does it make common sense to double mask in certain environments? Yeah. Is there a way that our institution, College of Menominee Nation, welcome, can partner with healthcare provider to provide testing on a weekly basis for our students, staff, and faculty on the Green Bay campus as we ensure a safe return? Our students do not live on campus, the commuters come from all areas. So there are different testing possibilities. We partnered with the state of Wisconsin to do UWGB and UW Oshkosh. Be happy to talk about that. And other health systems, I think would be happy to talk about that. It has proven effective. Initially we kind of scratched our heads, but if you looked at the percent positivity of UWGB remained under 3% when the cities was in 20 and 30%, that testing made sense. But it made sense because they were in a congregate setting. They were living on campus. We haven't really seen its effectiveness of those who commute. We're willing to talk about that and then see if the state would fund that. Your predictions for kids returning to school in person full-time this fall. Wow, everybody loves me to crystal ball on that one. Let's put it this way. Kids are doing okay in school today. And the American Academy of Pediatrics would say you should make your decisions based on what's going on in the community. That in-person schooling is a priority, and I've said that since day one. Having been the resident board member representative of the AAP when I was in training, I go with the AAP as a trained pediatrician. That in-person learning is better, but you have to look at what's going on in the community and community spread. Right now, our numbers are a little skewed because testing isn't as robust as we want it to be. If you wanted all kids to go back to school, you get everybody just going through the testing lines as much as you could every day, get our percent positivity to be more of an accurate number, quarantine those who have COVID, and I'd feel a lot better. Right now, we have to use a multitude of metrics to do that. Inpatient hospitalization, statewide numbers, all of which are pointing in the right direction. And we aren't seeing significant issues within the schools. And those that are doing it right, making sure that symptomatic kids are getting tested, no matter what a parent says, those are the students who are doing it right. Those that are maintaining a good time period of quarantine, those are districts who are doing it right. They're able to continue to function. You also need mitigation within the school to be masking and distancing. So technically, if we were able to get a really large chunk of this population, our population, vaccinated by the middle of the summer, we technically then get 2 weeks out of that. The population positivity in itself, based on that, should be significantly lower. And if those are the real metrics that we should be using, which I believe it is, and it's what the AAP would say, I would see no problem with school in the fall. A lot of caveats there with different things that could happen in society, but as it stands today, that would be my prediction. And it's just Dr. Rye's prediction, not fact. All right, Jill, great question. So right now we're only a Pfizer shop. She's asking us if we're Pfizer or Moderna. With the vaccines having different time frames required, do patients need to ask which vaccine? And will that be important for future boosters? So you'll have it on your card when you leave what you got. We recently, on Monday, were asked, would we be willing to offer a mix just to get more vaccine? We took a deep sigh because it's a complicated operations to offer both. But if our true intent is to get as many shots in arms as possible, we said yes. So to redesign some of our IT systems, which we've done this week, to be able to offer a 21-day appointment and a 28-day appointment, and we have that built in. So your second appointment with us is made before your rear leaves that chair after you receive that shot. So we've had to set up our IT systems differently. We'll manage both. I have a feeling we'll get a mix. What we'll likely do, because we operate right now one mass vaccination clinic. Next week, we open up 2 more in the state. We also operate kind of a moderate-sized one in O'Connell Falls at our hospital there. And then we'll have one on the west side of the state. We will likely try to make one shop, a Pfizer shop, one shop, a Moderna shop, and make it easier for the vaccinators. But we'll see what we get. One type of vaccine more effective to create immunity than the other. So both Moderna and Pfizer are about equivalent, J&J less. And that's what we found out in the last 24 hours. After I'm vaccinated, what is the protocol for quarantining if I'm exposed to live with? It's 14 days. Unfortunately, you will still need to quarantine for 14 days or 10 days or 7 days, depending on which CDC you follow. But anywhere from 7 to 14 days, there's different protocols, but you would still need to quarantine after being vaccinated. That'll change when we get a lot more shots in arms. So we all want to get back to normal. We never want to use the word quarantine again. The only way to do that is to really increase the volume of vaccination that we're giving. You need the shot at 2 weeks after the first shot. No, it's 21 days for Pfizer, 28 days for Moderna. So 3 weeks and 4 weeks. After I'm vaccinated with both doses, is there a time period, such as 7 days, before I'm safe to visit with family friends without a mask? Well, technically, you're not 100% protected. Remember, it's only 95%. So you should be masking at any time you can. But if you had 4 people that were all vaccinated, had a dinner party, not public, and it's safe in somebody's residence, that would be a little different risk factor. Everything's about mitigating risk. Now you're going to be significantly protected than you were before your vaccine. So you're going to have to make your own personal decisions. We recommend masking when not eating or in public at all times, even after vaccination. It's about 2 weeks after your second shot that you can consider yourself long enough time to have created that immune response. Why are some unable to smell or taste after having COVID? Well, Jolene, we're still trying to figure that out. It affects either directly the nerve endings in those areas, or we're starting to see more of a neurologic effect from the infection of COVID-19. It's something that's perplexed us. It's something that's very concerning because we know it's affecting organs other than lungs. So something we watch very carefully, but that is the cause right now. Who's determining who receives the vaccine in Wisconsin? Not me. So I just want to make that clear because there's a lot of negativity. Not Bellin, not Aurora, not Prevea. None of the health systems have any input into this. So we just follow directions. Just want to make that very clear to reduce the number of angry letters I get. It's the state that does that. So the state of Wisconsin, and we follow that. And if we don't follow that, we run the risk of not getting vaccine. And I would agree that it could be a lot better. There are everybody can make a case why they should go next. I mean, all the teachers made a case why they should go. So right now, a 59-year-old with high blood pressure, diabetes, COPD that just received a liver transplant, and that can easily be a patient in Green Bay, will get vaccinated after a 25-year-old third grade teacher. So understand that there are different factors at play. There's a large need to get kids back in school. Vaccination protects the teacher. It does not protect any quarantining rules and all that. So there's a misconception about that. But we don't make that decision. And as a physician, I struggle with this because obviously that 58-year-old patient of mine, I would want vaccinated, but I can't do that because of the state rules. Any advice for event planners as we think about summer? We'll know a little bit more about late spring when it comes to vaccine supply. And if we can get to a healthy area early to midsummer, I think you'll start to see a lot of event restrictions and risks be rethought by the CDC. But it's all really dependent on vaccine supply. When it gets here, it'll get in arms. I think all of us on the healthcare side know that for sure. But it's really going to depend on when that vaccine gets here. In other words, if we got 200 million doses, which is an awesome number, but it arrived here in June, then you're talking about how long it'll take to get those in arms and then 2 shots. And then 2 weeks after that, you're talking summer gone. If 200 million doses got here in April, well, yeah, then I think midsummer is a really good target. Provide us with your contact information to start a deeper conversation. Sure, I will do that at the end of this. Heard a number of people that have had COVID in the past, then have strong COVID symptoms for 2 to 3 days after they get the vaccine. How often is that happening? I'd say about 10 to 20% of the time, somewhere in there. And what they're having is a great immune response because remember, their body has a little bit of memory from that natural infection they got. Now they're going to have really good memory and a really good immune response from getting the vaccine. And it goes away usually within 48 hours, like most people having that immune response. You know, one of my thoughts on air travel, I have no issue with it, to be honest with you. As long as you're masking and the airlines have set things up, you know, from a spacing standpoint, I don't have an issue. I mean, there's circulation there. Everything has been improved in that situation. And we haven't seen any documented outbreaks from an airplane, to be honest with you. We've seen it from smaller congregate settings where people take their masks off, and that's where we see spread. So I really don't see an issue with that. And people talk to me about, well, is it safe to leave Wisconsin? Given how our state behaves, it's more dangerous to be in Wisconsin sometimes than it is to be out of it. So really hard for me to say no to travel, given our track history in this state is not good. Can a vaccinated person still be a carrier to others? We don't know that, Mickey. I think transmission is an endpoint that wasn't studied. It's being studied now. Common sense from a scientific standpoint would say no, but we need evidence. That's what scientists want. We want evidence. So a lot of people know somebody, so this is about somebody who knows 65-year-olds and when can they sign up. Right now, I would say our appointment slots are taken through the end of February, but more will open up as we understand what we're going to get. We opened up a very minimal number of slots based on what we've gotten in the past. And to be honest with you, they even may reduce that, so we're nervous about having to move people around. So we can't open up more slots till we know what we're going to get. How does that work in the state? Monday night, we get an email to say, how many vaccines do you want? How are you going to use them? Tuesday afternoon, they get all those emails. We send ours Monday night, but they all get put in a pot. Gets fed through this algorithm, which we feel needs to be readjusted to account for larger vaccination sites, because the algorithm today says everybody should get some, rather than taking advantage of those who could get it in people quicker. That's where there's a little bit of rub with us in DHS, but I don't think they ever predicted this. So, and then on anywhere from Thursday night to Sunday, we find out what we're going to get in a number, and then it may show up Monday or Tuesday. So we kind of keep a Monday, Tuesday log back so we can at least keep working at a minimal level as we start to get more. So we look at our week really Wednesday to Wednesday. Why are teachers scheduled for February vaccines if the state date is not until March 1st? So if a teacher is scheduled for February and they did one of two things, they lied on the attestation form. So for example, you have to go online to Prevea and you have to say what category you're in. If you're a teacher, you're not supposed to be selecting any category right now. But if you say you're a healthcare worker, then you could get vaccinated, get on the schedule. There are a couple institutions that violated DHS's rules. Janesville is the most public one, where their hand was slapped, where they were actually vaccinating teachers ahead of schedule. And DHS has come out with extremely strong language right now not to do that. But, I mean, we've had, and this is a true story, teachers that went online, didn't tell the truth. When they registered, they said who their employer was. We asked if they fell into one of these categories, and being put in person, it was much easier to lie with keyboard than it was in person, and they were sent away. And then we found 2 people that qualified to take their spot. So it's happening, and there's not much I can do about that. If somebody had COVID but also received a vaccine and has been exposed to a positive person again, do I need to quarantine? Yeah, unfortunately, the quarantine won't go away till we get to a larger percentage of immunity around us. Now, that's after the 90 days. So where we struggle with the CDC is you don't have to quarantine if you have a natural infection, but you do have to quarantine if you're vaccinated. So we are asking the CDC to revise that, but right now CDC guidelines are what they are. Long haulers, you know, it's been a rough road for a lot of people who have had COVID. This is not the cold, this is not the flu, and I think I'm a little frustrated with people saying that. We have an entire clinic just to deal with people who are still struggling with their after COVID recovery. We see a lot of issues with pulmonary function, probably the most. So, you know, their ability to breathe, their exercise tolerance, and I'm not talking about running on a treadmill. I'm talking about walking to the mailbox and having significant problems with that 1 to 2 months after. It's a deconditioning issue. There's certain areas where we need to use steroids. It's a very large population right now. Our clinic fills up on a weekly basis. So it is a real thing, and it needs to be addressed by a physician. There are things we can do. What's the best argument we can give to the state legislature about keeping a statewide mask mandate? All right, Joe. I think I got a little feisty on TV with this yesterday too. I'll try to not be as feisty today. It makes no sense in a state that we know that a highly contagious variant exists. We know that variant will infect more people just statistically because we have not been able to vaccinate a significant portion of our population. We know if you take that stat, that more people will get it. Statistically, more people wind up in the hospital and more people would die. Masking and physical distancing is the only mitigation effort that we have right now to do that. So why would you take that away? I understand the politics of this because I hate politics, so I had to look it up and understand why. They're mad because of the route the governor took to create a mask mandate. I'm totally fine with that. Be mad. Pass your own mask mandate then. But the excuse to get rid of the mask mandate because you don't like the politics of it, you have a political solution yourself to do. But getting rid of it completely is irresponsible and people will die. Hope that helped, Joe. So somebody read the Wall Street Journal that women are pregnant or planning to become pregnant should avoid the Moderna vaccine. Have you heard this? So I think that was taken out of context and then spread like crazy in the journal. What is actually going on in pregnancy right now is there was no actual safety trials in pregnancy. I'd like to ask you how many safety trials have ever been done for any medication or vaccine in pregnancy. Not many pregnant women raise their hand and say, hey, could you put something in me and experiment on me while I'm pregnant? So it's pretty rare to get a trial. So you have to extrapolate the safety, you have to understand the mechanism, and it's thought to be safe, but there's no proof of it. But we know that COVID in pregnancy, an active COVID infection, can be extremely bad for a pregnant woman. It can even lead to maternal death, and we've seen that in this city. And it leads to preterm labor, which is death of the child. So when you look at the risks of what COVID can do to a patient versus the unknown, it should be offered, is what ACOG says. So that's American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. You should offer it through education. And our OBs have actually done a town hall on this multiple times to explain that, including our maternal field and women's expert on that. Something specific to Moderna on the safety profile was being debated. And right now, I don't think ACOG has changed their recommendation. If they have, it happened in the last 24 hours. Couple links for me to look at, and I will. If someone had COVID but also received the vaccine, has now been exposed to a positive person again, do I need to quarantine? If not, what if I've passed the 3 months window after being positive, do I need to quarantine? If you're within the 90 days, you don't need to quarantine. If you're outside the 90 days, no matter vaccine or not, you need to quarantine. I've heard rumors of Kakana and Freedom being vaccinated. Not sure how that happened, but it wasn't us. We've made it very clear, March 1st, maybe. Because remember, March 1st is a maybe. 74-year-old who goes to Purveya, does he just keep going online watching for an opening, or can he call and get on a list? There is no list because, unfortunately, we don't know when we're going to get vaccine. If they do call, we have a callback situation for them to try to make sure that we get a hold of them when we do get vaccine. But the easiest and fastest way on how the doses are split up is still online. You can call and talk to somebody. We can walk you through that. Purveya.com/vaccine is another way with us too. I know Bell and Aurora have equal websites, and all of us are in this together. When will My Purveya be updated to include 1B so they can register? So we are debating this right now, because if we open it up, we don't know what 1B is. Remember, there's a 1B list that is prioritized, but we don't know, will it be just teachers? Will it be teachers in the next one down? Will it be teachers in the next 3 down? So who do we open it up to? How do we create that attestation to make it fair? I mean, there's a lot of ethical issues involved in this. So right now, till we get more from the state, we're holding back on opening up any slots for 1B till we know more from the state of Wisconsin, and hopefully we'll continue to hear that. Will this be available to share? That's up to Mickey. And I'm pointing at Mickey because she's up there on my screen. COVID brain. So, there's a couple issues with COVID and its long-term side effects. We know it affects more than just the lungs organ-wise. We know it directly affects the heart. We know it directly affects the nervous system. We know about some direct effects to the renal system, the kidneys. There are people that have basically a version of a viral meningitis or encephalitis actually after infection. And it can take a long time for that to recover their normal mentition, in other words, their normal brain functioning after COVID. Like I said, this ain't the cold, this ain't the flu. It can do a lot worse to you. That should get better over time, just like taste and smell. It can be up to 8 weeks. And we have seen some longer than that. So this is an interesting question. I'll be 65 later in the year. So you'd qualify at that birthday, not earlier. But if you're in other categories, you might qualify earlier. So the O blood type question, that's an awesome question that I get every so often. The head of internal medicine, the program director at the Medical College of Wisconsin, calls this interesting cocktail party discussion, but no research. So we have anecdotally seen those with an O blood type have a less chance of being infected, but no actual proof of that and no reason why. So that's why he's a hematologist. So he calls it interesting cocktail party discussion. It has been noted, but once again, not something that we've seen in the research yet. And I think there is some work being done on that. So do I have any insight on countries coming in and out with travel? So what I would recommend, go to the CDC website and they'll tell you what your quarantine would be when you get back, if you'd have to quarantine when you get back, what the rules are to get in and what the rules are to get out. What I would recommend is do a ton of research before. There are some great destinations if you need to get away that essentially create an entire bubble when you get there. In other words, safer than being in Wisconsin, especially with our political climate right now. And what I mean by bubble is you land, you're tested, you get to your resort, you're locked in a room till your test is negative, and then you're given a key to get out, and then you can't leave the resort. So there's a lot of different places to get creative, but you got to do your research. And rules change all the time, so make sure you're looking at the rules of the CDC on a regular basis. Children. So children getting the vaccine. Pardon me, guys, my allergies are kicking in with my eye today. So they weren't studied. Now they're being studied. So Pfizer studied 16 and above, Moderna studied 18 and above. 16 and below are being studied now. I would expect some results by the summer, maybe release the vaccine in the fall. Exercising, really after COVID, it really depends what your comfort level is. And if you find yourself significantly deconditioned, there could be other issues dealing with that. And there are medications we can give you to possibly help with that. So if you're having a hard time, if you're like me, who's a Peloton guy, and you suddenly went from the middle of the leaderboard to the end of the leaderboard after COVID, and it's been 2 weeks, I would recommend seeing your physician because there are other things that could be going on that we can help you with. At this point in the flu season and this vaccine coming out, is it recommended that we still go out to get the flu shot this season? Most definitely. You want to make sure of it, but understand, any vaccine, when compared to the COVID vaccine, you need a 14-day window around the shot. In other words, if you get the flu shot, you can't get the COVID shot, first shot or second shot within 14 days on either side of the shot. So plan your vaccinations around that. Going forward, will they combine both vaccines? Really don't know. They're very different vaccines, so I don't see that. And plus, we also don't know if this is going to be an annual vaccine, a once every 5-year vaccine. We just don't know that yet. So it's kind of hard to have a crystal ball on that one. Somebody's showing symptoms 60 days after testing positive. Are they still contagious? Not contagious, but could be like we said, one of those long haulers and having issues from a pulmonary standpoint that need to be evaluated by a physician. That could change if they're an immune compromised individual. So that person should definitely see their physician, because it still could be contagious if they've got serious immune compromised states such as HIV, such as undergoing chemotherapy. There are certain different caveats to that. 60 days is still a long time though. So can somebody test positive if they're showing symptoms after a month after the original test? Yeah, they can. There's actually dead virus in you that can trigger a positive test for months after your first positive test. That's why in the 90-day period after being infected, we don't recommend retesting. After that, we consider it real. You catch COVID a second time, or more, I guess, and will the symptoms be less as your body killed it off before? Hard to know, Sheila, hard to know what your infection rate was, what kind of immune response you had the first time versus second. Pretty unpredictable. I'll make you look like I'm out of questions.
Did you have some on the list that was sent that you covered with the other group?
No, I think actually this group was awesome. And thank you all for the questions. I hope my answers helped you at all. There was a list of questions handed in early, and I'm trying to see, what's out there. I think that the ear to the ground stuff for the next week is definitely vaccine distribution from the federal government. We've been in communication with Congressman Gallagher's office, Senator Baldwin's office, Congressman Kine's office, and really saying that, both from the legislative side and the executive side, there needs to be an analysis on how this could happen better and faster. And on the state side, how can we stand up more large volume vaccine sites with state assistance? Because that's really what's needed. I love the small town clinic concept, but with these vaccines and the transport involved in all of that, it's just going to be a lot more effective. And it was a lot more effective internationally and around the country when done in mass sites. You look at what's going on at Dodger Stadium, and we're smaller than LA, so we'll proportionally need to scale it down. They're doing an amazing job there right now at Dodger Stadium. They're actually doing a really good job. We wanted to do it big. We also wanted to do it right. So what I mean by that is, if you go to Florida right now and you try to schedule your COVID test, you use Eventbrite. Last time I used Eventbrite was nightclub reservations in Miami. Not exactly what I call a HIPAA compliant platform. And then when you get a vaccine, they watch you in a car. Well, we want to be able to watch you. That adverse reaction could happen. So we actually have monitors doing that. What if there was a recall, like happened in California for a couple of vials that they thought there was an issue, turned out not to be? Well, when you get an injection with us, we barcode a sticker on that injection, on that syringe. That's a copy of the vial that it came from. And that barcode goes directly into your medical record. So if there's ever a recall, we know exactly who got it, when they got it, and who to call. So that's doing it right. So you can do it big and you can do it right. And that's what we need in the state. All right, I'm gonna make sure I didn't miss any questions. So how do you encourage your workforce to get this? I struggled with this, and I'm not Catholic, so I just want to go ahead and put that out there. But I read something from the bishops that really resonated with me. The reason I was reading it because they were talking about, fetal cells, the development of vaccines. Is Moderna and Pfizer okay? And just so you know, the Bishops' Council on this said Moderna and Pfizer, all the vaccines that are coming through, are okay. So for Catholics out there that need that, there's a great document that the bishops put together. But what makes it great is not only the education they provided for those that are concerned based on their religion or where they come from on their opinions on certain subjects, but it's how it ended. So I look at the Catholic Church as probably one of the largest employers in the world, one of the largest businesses in the world. And the bishop talked about a Catholic principle, which I think goes across all religions and even those without religions, and it's the common good. And really, when I talk about getting vaccinated, it's about the common good. It's about taking care of yourself so you're not a burden on society, and making sure don't get infected and go to the hospital. But also making sure we can get rid of this disease, and the only way we can is if enough people get vaccinated so we can move on. So the common good for the public and the common good for the individual is the standpoint I go on for getting people vaccinated. Just thought it was a really good sentiment from them. I recommend, whatever religion you might subscribe to, if you actually subscribe to one. Sometimes you can learn from everybody, and I learned a lot from that. I just thought it was really well written. So I don't like to reinvent the wheel, so I'll quote the bishops. All right, spring break. Traveling outside the US, what about places like hotels, water parks, or hotels in general? If it was me, either I'd want to go into the bubble I described. So there's certain resorts that create like a complete bubble where there's masking that's mandated, testing that's mandated, kind of like the NBA bubble. It's not perfect, but it's probably better than what we're in now. If traveling, with your family, try the Airbnb VVRO kind of concept. I think that's the initials. I've never done it. And then act like you're home. Mask when you leave the house, stick to your family only, make sure you're safe. Outdoors is better than indoors. Avoid large, huge public gatherings that are indoor. You can plan a really good spring break, and the CDC has a great tip sheet on this, because the last thing I'm going to do is tell you not to take a break. We all need one, but you can do it safely. Would it be right for employers to say, if you don't have the vaccine, you cannot return to the office, yet all those who are vaccinated are returning? How does this affect the dynamic of the office? This is a real tough one. There's a lot of legal issues out here. EEOC has chimed in right now. It's not suggested you have a policy like that because there are a few unknowns out there. It's not suggested that you create a mandate for now. That may come in the future, but for now, I think right now, you'd want to do other ways, organic ways, to get people to encourage them to get vaccinated. Phase 1B included workers in the food supply chain, our company services, and works in a lot of these. Would they be eligible for 1B? So what I would recommend is, if you have a certain classification of employers and you want to know if they fall into that category, is to communicate with public health. Our Brown County Public Health Office and all the surrounding public health officers are amazing. They can help sort that out and even get that answered a little bit better through DHS for you. So I'd recommend that you have that conversation with public health. And once again, a mandate question. I don't know if any employer is mandating a vaccine. We are not mandating it at this time. So we have that caveat in the end. That may change as time goes on. All righty. I'm waiting for questions here, Mickey, but not seeing any.
No.
So once again, I think, just really continuing your advocacy to DC, advocating patients locally. Don't get rid of mask mandates, especially not now. We're almost to the finish line. Let's not lose any more people. I have a list inside my journal, and I carry it in a card, and I actually gave it to the governor, and I gave it to Governor Thompson. It's a list of the first names of all the patients I lost in November that I took care of that died. Some died truly in my presence. And I also lost a family member in the last month. So if you thought I was passionate before, significantly more passionate now, that I don't want to lose any more people. So let's not make decisions where more people die. I think that's something that we need to advocate for.
It looks like the questions. Yep, it looks like the questions are all done. Thank you, Dr. Rye, for your time and your diligent effort to keep us all safe and protected and informed. So thank you so much for being with us, and thank you everyone for being on the call. The recording will be available later on their website.
Thanks, guys.